I'm Sofia Dominguez, Community Manager and your host of Wake Up. Today we have a special episode, and this is about content and copywriting. Most of our users in Galaxy, they are always asking us how to improve our acceptance rate or answer rates in our message, emails, etc. So I think the best one to explain how can we improve this is Elyse Savaki. I will present you a little bit about Elise, and then you can add something if you would like to add. I think she's from New York, or at least she's in New Jersey, I think, right?
You're right. Yep. New Jersey, just an
Okay,
hour outside of New
yes.
York.
She's an expert in copywriting and has a company called outreachcopy.com. She helps business owners and freelancers, marketers, everyone who wants to improve their copywriting. And today we'll speak a little bit more about cold email copywriting. But I would like, do you want to add something else to your introduction that we should know about you?
You know what? On the deck, I have a little bit about it, but you covered the basics. Yeah.
Okay, good. So, just like an introduction, I would like to know if we can have the difference between cold outreach copy and marketing automation campaign. Do you have any difference that we should know? Like, I guess these are different topics or copies that they should be with a
Yeah.
different template and content. But if you can like specify what is it about cold email that it's different from the other, so we can have like a main idea would be nice.
Absolutely. So there's a really big difference between cold outreach copy and your regular marketing email copy. It starts with the fact that typically when you're sending regular marketing emails, those people have opted into your list. So they know who you are. They probably sought you out at some point in order to end up on your marketing list. Cold outreach is the exact opposite. It is far more like running cold traffic to a Facebook ad and landing page, in that it's likely the first time those people are going to have heard from you. So they don't know you, you don't have their express permission to reach out to them, which
Okay.
means that you need to be very relevant and your approach is going to be different. It's like meeting somebody at a business meeting for the first time. You're going to introduce yourself versus jump right into an offer.
Okay. And would you say that cold email is the same as doing the cold outreach on LinkedIn?
Very similar. It's going to be different because the platforms are different, but it's very
Yes.
similar.
Okay. So any tips that you shared today could be applied for LinkedIn.
Yeah. So you would shorten them. You might make them more social in nature, but in general, yeah, the
Okay.
tips that I share today will apply over to LinkedIn.
Okay. Good. So I will be taking notes if everyone wants to take notes too. And but at the end of the presentation, there's a Q&A button, I think in the bottom of the chat, where you can add your questions and I will read them to Elise at the end, okay? So do you want to
Perfect.
start sharing your screen?
Yep. Give me 1 second here.
I don't know. Yeah, I think I already gave you permission, so it's good. Okay, yes.
Yep. And let me just get to the beginning of this and hit present and we will go.
Good.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. We're going to go through a deck about cold email copy. So this cold email clinic today, I'm going to give you the basics, like basically my 3 cardinal rules for cold outreach. I'm going to give you some resources to make sure that you know what should be in your outreach. And then we're even going to break down some of the emails that you guys sent us so I can share some tips for you. I did some modifications on them so you can kind of see real live examples as well. So thank you for everybody who submitted your emails and said that we could use them for this. Really appreciate it. So Sophia gave you guys a little bit of an introduction, but let me just recap, like, why would you want to take cold email advice from me? For one, I've been writing outreach for over 10 years now, both for myself as a salesperson and then for startups, agencies, local businesses, multinational corporations, you know, in all sorts of different verticals, including consulting, marketing, SaaS, infrastructure tech, benefits, a little bit in oil and gas, some healthcare stuff. Pretty much the principles that I'm going to teach you should work no matter what industry that you're in. You're going to modify them a little bit to make sense to your audience as you would any piece of marketing. But I've worked in multiple high-end lead generation agencies as well. So about half the time that I've been doing B2B cold email was for lead generation agencies, which meant that these things had to work at a very high volume as well. So that is just a little bit about me. I won't belabor that since Sophia has already introduced us. Let's jump on in.
Nice.
So I already kind of gave you the agenda. We're going to go over the 3 cardinal rules for email, how to stand out in the inbox, and we're going to break down the different components of a cold email. So subject lines, preview lines, CTAs, and how to get replies, the core formula for writing emails that work. And then we're going to do a couple live campaign reviews as well. All right. So before we dive
We're
too
ready
deep,
to start.
can you guys see this?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Sorry. I just wanted to make sure. So before I get too deep on that, I just want to cover like why it matters to dial in your message. So for one thing, more leads, right? When you're engaging in any marketing campaign, you want to get the most out of it that you can. But the better your message is, the better qualified those leads are going to be. And if you're a small business, it's super important because you probably don't have a sales development team doing stuff for you. So you want to make sure that as the business owner or founder, your time is best used on the phone. And of course, no matter how you got your data, you spent resources to get it, whether that was your time, whether it was money buying a list, you want to make sure that you're getting the most out of that investment. All right. So 3 components to a successful cold email campaign. I have to cover all of this very briefly before we dive into the copy and messaging, because it's important that you guys know you need all 3 of these things to really win at cold email. Your targeting and list building, there's no substitution for that. We can give you the best messaging on the entire planet. And if it's going to the wrong people or the data is bad, it's not going to matter. So you really do have to focus on that. We're not going to touch on that too much today because this is a copy clinic. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that to you. Same for deliverability. That's the making sure that your tech setup on your email side is correct so that people actually get the message. That means whatever email addresses you're sending through, making sure stuff like your DMARC, your SPF records, your DKIM, things like that are set up. I'm not an expert in that. So again, I'm going to mention it so you're aware of it, but we're not going to deep dive on that. What we are going to deep dive on, yeah.
Just one thing.
Yeah.
About deliverability, you can watch episode 3, where we talked about this with Jeremy Chatelain, and just to share a good, like we have good tips there for them. Okay, so episode 3 is all about deliverability. Today is all about copywriting. So
Sophia has you guys covered.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, so let's jump into these rules for cold email. Cardinal rules for cold email. And Sophia, if you have questions as I'm going through it, I've moved the little window over so I can see you. So just jump in for sure.
Thank you.
All right. So the very first rule that I have for everybody for cold email, this list that I have for you on the right is very, very long, and you're probably not going to be able to read it here, but I'm assuming you're going to be able to see this deck later. This list is long intentionally. So when people write cold email, a lot of times they try to dive right in without doing the prep work first. It's really important to know who you are to your prospect and who they are as well. So this is actually a relatively short list of things that you should go through and answer these questions in as much detail as possible before you ever try to write really any piece of marketing. So what is the problem that you solve? How does your solution actually benefit your prospects? And you need to go deeper than it saves them time or money. Get as specific as you can with that. So if we're talking about a sales CRM that automatically updates after a rep has a conversation with a prospect, right? The value there is that you can accurately forecast your pipeline, your revenue goals. You could say, yeah, it'll make you more money, but that's way too many steps ahead in the process. So get as specific as you can with stuff like that so your prospects can envision what you actually do for them. You also need to consider, why do most prospects struggle to solve the problem that you solve for them? So before they get to you, what is going wrong? What wrong tree are they barking up? All of those things. That's important context as you're setting up your email outreach. What's unique to your approach to solving this problem and getting results? So why are you different than any other solution that they've tried? And so if you're a service provider, this might be your unique approach to the service that you provide. If you're a software solution, you may have found, a missing hole, a gap in other softwares out there, for example. Okay, service features and benefits. So, you probably have a long list of benefits to what you do. A long list of features, pair it up to an actual benefit, a concrete benefit. So if we're using the sales CRM example, automatically updates after a call so that your reps always have full context and know their next follow-up step. right? That would be a feature and benefit pairing. You also want to organize all of your credibility. So how many years you've been in business or in their industry, any recognizable clients or logos, case studies and client results, even if they're not from famous brands, testimonials, and any other relevant recognition like publications, speaking engagements, awards, and even your own story of solving the problem. So if you come from a similar background to your prospects, you have a story that led you to solve this issue. Use all of that and get it all down on paper so that you have it to reference when you're writing your outreach. And then finally, I see this missing a lot. What's the outcome of taking a meeting with you? Even if they don't become a client, how will they benefit if they engage with you? And that might be they learn what some of their competitors are doing. They learn what's going on in the market. You may not use this explicitly in your outreach. Some of the examples I'll show you do, some don't, but really, really useful as a thought exercise to know what are they getting out of this versus just what you're getting out of it. All right, so that's rule number one. It's a long one. It is well worth the time to do the homework on this. And actually at the end of this, I have the entire questionnaire that I give to clients to collect this kind of information for them. So if you guys take that and use it, it will help you in any marketing that you do. All right, okay. Let's go to the next one. This should be rule number 2, not another rule number 1. But when we're actually writing the outreach, don't assume that your prospects know anything about what you're talking about. And they may be experts in the same field that you are. So if you're a marketer reaching out to other marketers, for example, they may be very, very sophisticated. But what they probably weren't at the moment they opened your email is thinking about that thing. So when you jump right into products and features, they're not on the same page as you yet. You need to back up a few steps, focus on how they'll know if they have a problem and why that problem is important to solve. That helps get them in the right frame of mind for then the rest of stuff that you're going to share in your email. It's kind of like when you walk into a room and just start talking to somebody midstream and they were like focused on something else and it takes them a minute to catch up to what you're talking about. You don't want to do that in your cold email. There's a saying in sales, a confused mind doesn't buy. And so a confused mind doesn't take the meeting either.
This is interesting, actually, because sometimes I do think they know about my business and I'm like, la, and then they're like, whoa, Sophia. Like a little bit of context is really good, like before.
Yeah,
I think
it helps a lot, doesn't
sometimes
it?
we jump in and it's like, wait, what are you talking about? So yes, I think this is a good rule.
Awesome. Yeah. And so rule number 3 is very much related, and that's keep it simple. So, sometimes when you're talking to other professionals, like 2 of the examples that we have today when we break down emails are emails that are going to lawyers and emails that are going to healthcare professionals. And so there's a fine line when you're reaching out to professionals like that, software engineers are another group to include in this, of wanting to use enough of their lingo and their verbiage so that you sound like an insider, but not convoluting your message so much that they have to think really hard to understand what you're talking about. So that's kind of the same idea as don't just barge into the room and start talking, like give them a chance to catch up. So that means use plain English as much as you can, cutting out industry jargon. Keep your reading to like a 5th to 8th grade level. The Hemingway app, by the way, is really great for checking this. And then when in doubt, like I like the parent test here. If I sent this to my parents, would they have any clue what I was talking about? Like they don't have to fully get it, but would they be in the right ballpark, right? So sometimes this feels like dumbing it down, but it's really just using brain science to your advantage. So I want to highlight that and remind everybody to do that because we all get guilty of that. All right. Any questions on that one?
No, I think it's clear.
Cool. All right. So I want to go through the basic anatomy of a cold email with you guys before we actually get into like how we're going to write this thing and do the copy. So subject line, of course, we all know what a subject line is. These differ a lot from marketing subject lines, and I'll get into that on the next slide. But I want you to pay a lot of attention to those. The preview line, this is also a little bit different than when you're sending a marketing email. So if you're sending an email through MailChimp, usually you get to like set the preview line that's going to show up in their inbox. In a cold email, it's literally just the first line of your message. Of course, we all know what the message body is here, and then a call to action. So that's what you want them to do. There's a lot of different calls to action. We'll deep dive on these 2. They can be very soft or very direct. The one in this sample message right here happens to be very soft.
Okay, good.
All right, so let's get into rules for subject lines because these are very different from your marketing emails. Thing to keep in mind is nobody's going to respond if they never even open it. And since they're not opted into your list, they don't know who you are, the typical marketing subject lines don't normally work super well in this context. So the rules are a little bit different. Keep it short. I like, 2 to 3 words, 5 at the absolute most, but you'd better have a really, really good reason for it being 5 words, like a personal invite somewhere. Make it relevant and specific to what's inside. So that can be pretty basic, something like quick question, which a lot of people hate that subject line, and it gets a lot of hate in general on like LinkedIn, for example, but it still works really well. And then gut check it. Would you use it in a real life one-to-one email that you were sending somebody? And the other rule to remember, no clickbait. Don't try to make somebody think they missed a meeting or forgot something or are in trouble. I see those come through every now and then, and they might get the open, but those kinds of bait and switches or things that give them heart palpitations are unlikely to yield a positive response for you. So just keep that in mind because you might see that advice floating around out there on the
Would
internet.
would you add emojis to these subject lines, or would you leave this to marketing email campaigns?
I would usually leave that to email marketing campaigns as a general rule. There may be exceptions to that depending on your industry, but in general, I would leave them out.
Okay.
Same for most punctuation in the email, like question marks and things like that. Sometimes they can be spam flags. So keep that in mind. Just keep it simple and short.
Okay.
All right. So first lines. So the first line of your message, which I showed you guys, they work with subject lines to get attention. And I'm sorry, I have no idea where this extra text came from on my slide. They work with subject lines to get attention and get the open. So you can also use them though to help you qualify prospects and set context for the message. I like to keep them very personal. So when they are showing up in the preview line, there are things like, "Hi, Tom, reaching out because," or "Brad, saw that you're doing XYZ thing at Acme Co." Or, "Hey, Lisa, I think Acme is, doing such and such a thing." I like to use subject line or first lines like that because they're engaging. They can be somewhat personalized. If you've hand curated a list, this is a great place to do true personalization. If you're doing it based on industry, this is a great place to, highlight what's going on in the industry, things that will be of interest to them, right? So they should sound personal to some extent. All right. And then for your CTAs, and then we'll dig into message body. The biggest number one rule for calls to action at the end of your email, these are the things where, you're asking them for a meeting, is they need to comply with CAN spam. So the general rule for that is make sure it's personal, relevant communication. Typically that's going to be meeting requests and soft CTAs, like, "If this is of interest, would you be open to some more information?" What you can't do is send mass like webinar signups, unsolicited sales pitches, links to click for them to, self-serve on things, unless it's kind of couched very much in that idea of a personal relevant communication. The easiest way to make sure you're in compliance is make sure your primary CTA is a direct meeting request or one of the soft CTAs that I mentioned. So that's the CAN spam rule. The rules for being effective though, pick one call to action and only one. I see a lot of emails come through where there's multiple links to click, multiple things to do in the email, and that confuses the prospect. Give them one step to take next. Be specific and make sure it's clear what action that should be. So you'd be surprised how many emails I see where it's a whole bunch of information and then there's actually no next step for them, whether it's like, should they request more information? Should they ask for a meeting? What should they do next? Make sure your CTA is actually there. And as we kind of talked about already, don't be afraid to go soft on them, asking if you can share info or if they'd be interested in hearing more. A good rule of thumb there is if I got this email, what's the next step I'd be comfortable taking?
Okay, good. So soft is better than go directly and ask for a call or a meeting.
It depends. I'll use both throughout a sequence that I'm doing. I'll use a mixture of them. But if in doubt, I would go softer and ask if they'd be interested in learning more or if they'd be interested in more information. And then you can offer up a meeting that way. But either work.
Okay, do you have any metric in which one works better? Like to ask for the call directly or just wait for another email to ask for the call? Like which one works better
I
for?
I don't have metrics on that, and I don't think it's necessarily a one works better than the other.
Okay.
I think it's a matter of one, it might depend a little bit on industry, right? If they're an industry that gets pummeled all the time, you might test using a softer CTA because everybody else is asking for the meeting. Um, I think there's a few different ways to approach that, but I don't think it's a clear cut one is better than the other.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. On to the message body. So I'm giving you guys the core formula that I use for just about every cold email that I write. And so here it is. There's 5 pieces to it. The why you're reaching out. So that's really your opening line. A problem that they have and why solving it matters. So that is, context there. Your solution and how it works, credibility, and a call to action. You may not use every single one of these in every email, and that's fine, but it gives you a framework for making sure that the prospect has enough context to say yes to the meeting. That's the whole goal, is really to sell the meeting. And in case I didn't say it enough, the job of every line in your email is to help the reader know if it makes sense to keep reading and whether it makes sense to take you up on that call to action. So that's why we have that structured that way. It should lead them through a natural progression so that they can know whether this is right for them to spend time talking to you. The one thing I like to tell everybody is that, like, the one resource that nobody gets more of is time, right? So if you're talking to a very busy person, sometimes it's worth them to read a little bit more in an email so that they know if it's worth their time to hop on a call or engage further than to make the leap and get on a call right off the bat. It's a little bit counterintuitive to a lot of the advice out there, but it served me very, very well over the last 10 years. All right. So let's take a look. I have a few sample emails that I wrote up so that you can see that core formula in action, and then we'll look at your guys' emails. Oops, hang on. All right. So this is a long version of that formula in action. This is actually less than 200 words. It reads pretty quickly, and let me read it out to you. So we start with the reason for reaching out. Tom, reaching out because I have a few ideas for ABC Co's sales team and prospecting efforts. Not sure if you've moved to an account-based prospecting system yet, but the companies who have are killing it. And then we go to why that problem needs to be solved. They're booking meetings with decision makers and closing deals 20% faster because account-based marketing builds context for their brand with the exact companies on their wish list and the right decision makers. The only problem, so you'll see this is a little bit reversed. We solved the problem before we called it out. Doing account-based marketing is hard. Multiple contacts, multiple channels, multiple personalities and personas. So many teams leave it on their Sunday list for when they have a team to support it. How you help? XYZ company is that team. We help sales and marketing companies go all in on ABM and fill their pipeline now, even if they have the world's smallest marketing team. This is your credibility piece, we're already helping brands like LMNOP get in meetings 20% faster than they were before we started supporting them. And here's your call to action. Would it make sense for me to share more about how we're doing that and see if it might be worth a discussion for ABC? Let me know. So one thing to see in this CTA, there's also a little bit of a what they're going to get out of it. Would it make sense for me to share more about how we're doing that? The implication there is peek behind the curtain at how these companies are having this success. So that's an important thing to think about when you're writing your CTAs, and the message that comes before it is what's the benefit that the prospect or the recipient is going to get out of this. Now, quick note, Sophia, because you asked about LinkedIn earlier, this message in general is way too long for LinkedIn. You may send it later, like I've sent ones this long, but you wouldn't open with something like this, like you could in an email. There's a few in this that we're going to get to next, and I'll highlight them because they are actually they're a more direct fit for LinkedIn.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So for email, here's the next way that we're using that core formula. This is what I call the client results version. So, hey, Alex, we've got another month left in Q1, and most founders have a pretty good idea of where they stand on hitting their sales quotas. But a lot don't know that there's opportunities for their outreach to do even better. So there's a problem for them. Last month, XYZ Co put 10 more meetings on their calendar when we uncovered some hidden opportunities in the cold emails they were sending and made some targeted adjustments to their messaging. So there's a client result, which is the why it's important to solve this problem as well. And then, a little bit of the how we solve a problem for them. And then here's that CTA, worth a chat to see if ABC has some hidden opportunities as well. Notice how the benefit to them is built in there directly. If they have hidden opportunities in their outreach, they could be putting more meetings on their calendar. So this is one that you might be able to use this on LinkedIn. Not first, you would use this, as maybe like a third touch. And you might round it out to make it a little bit more like conversational to fit the platform. Yeah.
Okay. And about the length, this one is shorter, but which length would you recommend on an email? Like I saw the one before was a little bit longer. Like, do you have any minimum or maximum of words?
I try not to go over 200 words for an email in general. Every now and then I do. And in my career, I've actually written like truly long form cold email, which I don't recommend many people do because it's very hard to execute on. But one takeaway that I'd like everybody to have from this is that there's no one way to write outreach. There's a lot of ways that work. And so part of the trick is figuring out which one works best for you, your prospects, your industry. But all of these versions of this that I'm going to show you, I'm actually going to show you how to kind of put them together in a sequence that is primarily an email sequence. And then I'll talk a little bit how you can make LinkedIn touch points in there too. All right, here's one more long version, but this one's the common problem version. So this one can be really great for freelancers or marketers or other service providers. So Alex, reaching out because most of the software companies I work with have three main problems when it comes to sending cold email. One, they've built a highly targeted list full of dream accounts, but they're burning through it without getting any replies or meetings. Two, they're spending a lot of money on tools, tech, and data to target prospects at the exact right time, but they're still not seeing any returns. Notice how each of these, it's paired the problem and then the implication of that problem, like why it's important to solve it. They're starting to worry about damaging their brand reputation, but they're still emailing because they need leads and they need to crack the code on this prospecting channel in order to hit their goals. If any of those resonate, would it make sense for me to share more about how we helped XYZ right the ship and add 10 more meetings to their calendar last month? All my best. So again, you kind of see all those different components being woven together in a slightly different format here. I like this one a lot in an email. You can use it in a LinkedIn as well, down the way a little bit. And again, like anything for LinkedIn, soften it out and be more conversational. But if you're using like Alex's functionality of being able to send a blended campaign, I would keep this one for the email.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah. So here's one that I usually, when I'm doing just email, I'll use this with small businesses. And also if reply rates are low, I might interject this into a sequence, but this is a great one to open up with on LinkedIn. So another use case for it that I don't have listed on the slide. It's a question designed to get replies. So Alex, wondering if XYZ ABC's, oh my gosh, guys, I can't talk. Sorry. Wondering if ABC Co uses any cold outreach, email or LinkedIn as part of your sales process. Best, Elyse. So that one's a natural fit for LinkedIn, right? As you guys can tell, writing is more my skill set than talking. But yeah, so for this and how you might use it, like if you started a new sequence with it, or you can insert it into a sequence that's getting low replies to see if you can generate some conversation. If you get a positive reply, you can carry on with your kind of normal framework. If you get a no, proceed manually to learn more from them. Like, why is it a no, or why aren't they doing this thing? That's a couple benefits there, right? It could be objection busting. Maybe you'll still get a meeting out of it, but it's also learning what's going on with your prospects. If they're not doing this thing already, why not? What are they worried about? Because that informs how you might write future marketing. So anyway, this little one-liner is a very, very handy email to have in your toolkit, or LinkedIn message for that matter.
Okay, nice. I didn't know, like you can send like short emails, but this one is really good and it's like just a sentence.
Yeah.
I think it's worth a try. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And like anything, test it, see what works. Sometimes, it's not enough context for somebody to want to engage in a conversation, and other times it is. A lot of that has to depend on how much email they get generally, right?
Yes.
All right, let's talk about some common pitfalls for cold outreach. So these are three that I actually saw represented in the emails that came through to us, as well as I see this generally as well. Targeting is a really big one. I know I mentioned that up front, but you can have the best email in the entire world, but if it's not going to the right people or the data is bad, it doesn't matter. You have to pair the right people with the right message. So again, can't deep dive too much on that today, but pay attention to that when you're building lists or choosing prospects. Don't just pull a big list and fire off emails to it. Take the time to proof it and make sure that it's truly the people you want to reach. Context and value. I know that's basically everything that we've talked about so far, is making sure that the right things are there to give your recipients everything they need to know if they should engage with you further. So that's why it's really important to get clear on who you are to your market, how you serve them. That big long list that I gave you up front, that's why it's really important to go through that, because it is very, very hard to write even those simple emails if you don't have that stuff nailed down. And then the third one that I saw represented quite a bit in the email submissions to us was a standalone email. So usually a single email isn't enough. And that goes for LinkedIn too. People are busy. You need a sequence. A few reasons for that. One, people miss things in their inbox, right? They mean to come back to it. They missed it altogether. Maybe it wasn't the right angle or the right message for them at that moment to help them understand why they needed to engage. So the more messages you have in a sequence, the more opportunity you have to speak to them in the language that they need to hear. There's not going to be just one right message that works on everybody. Your prospects have different concerns, different priorities, things like that. So when you identify the top ones, which, going through that exercise that I gave you in the beginning should help with, then you can kind of see how to structure emails to hit those different concerns throughout the course of the sequence.
Do you have any suggestion on how many emails should we use
Yeah,
for a sequence? Just not to be
absolutely.
like a spammer. Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah. So here's a sample sequence. I put 6 in here for you guys. And this actually uses the emails that I showed you as we went through here. I write sequences anywhere from 6 to 9 emails, sometimes longer if they're meant to go out over a very, very long period of time. But I would take this 6 email sequence and run it over, probably 8 weeks to be conservative and like safe. You could do it 8 to 9 weeks.
Okay, and this sequence works when they don't reply to the first email, right? They go like no replies and like, okay, good.
Yeah. Yep. So, and that of course is a big difference between a purpose-made cold outreach tool and then a typical marketing tool, where in a typical marketing platform, you wouldn't want your people to get unsubscribed because they replied. That would be a really bad thing. But in cold email, of course, the exact opposite is true. You don't want them getting prospecting messages when they've already engaged with you. So yeah, this would only continue through if they haven't replied.
Okay.
And so you'll see for my cold emails, a lot of times I'll start with a long email framework, like that long one I showed you. The next one might be a client results email. Email 3 might be another of the long ones, but highlighting a different set of problems that they have. Email 4 might be the 3 problems email. Email 5 could be that super short one. We wrote up a case study about how XYZ did ABC. If that's of any interest to your team, should I send it your way? You can do something very short like that. And then a closeout email. And I gave you the framework for that here. In between this, you can interject LinkedIn. So that question email that I gave you, you might interject that as a LinkedIn invite, for example, or a LinkedIn message. So you can interject little things like that in here to like broaden out this sequence.
I like it. Yes.
Awesome. Any questions on that?
Well, there's someone asking which tool to use for planning automatically these emails. I would say Galaxy, but if you have any other suggestion, it's fine.
Well, so here's the thing. I would also say Galaxy for this because you can do your email and your LinkedIn right there. And there's not too many platforms that do that. So I would probably save myself the headache and use a system where you can do it all in one place.
Yes, we actually have some sequences where you can do both at the same time. And these emails are sent to professional emails, not to personal emails, which is good. Email addresses.
Right.
Because
yeah. And that's
actually,
really rare.
It's important, right? Like it's important to reach them in their professional email instead of their like personal email.
Correct. Yeah, the only exception I would give to that is like if you're reaching out to super small businesses like bakeries, like they may not have a true professional email. But yeah, in general, like absolutely. And it's really rare to have a platform that does both the LinkedIn and the email all in one place like that. Um, which is one
Okay,
of the
so
reasons when you guys reached out to me, I was like, yes, I would love to chat with you guys.
thank you. There's
Yeah.
another question. Like
Yeah.
okay, so you send the first email, and
Mhm.
how many days would you wait for the next email to be sent? Because someone is saying that 4 emails in 4 days is aggressive. So how much time do you need to wait before sending the next email?
So I would
Just
use this entire sequence over like 8 weeks or so. And so that's going to leave you like at least a week between each email, possibly up to like 8 days between each. The last one, I usually leave more like 10 days or even 14 days between email 5 and email 6. But yeah, I would not send these out, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. I would spread this out over about 8 weeks or up
okay.
8 to 9 weeks. Um, that's something that's worth testing, but I like to give people conservative recommendations on that first so that you don't come across like a spammer. Much easier to ramp it up if you find that that's appropriate for your market rather than, send all of these right at once and get yourself blacklisted.
Okay. And there's another one. Okay, so if the target audience is a CEO, how the language we use, professional, formal, or personal touch?
I think that's going to matter more in your industry necessarily than their title. If you are reaching out to financial CEOs, you're probably going, especially large companies, you're probably going to take a slightly more formal tone than if you're reaching out to the CEO of, an e-commerce brand, for example, where their culture is going to be a little bit more casual, more than likely. At the end of the day, everybody is human. And so I always err on the side of the way I wrote, if you go back through the samples I gave you are a pretty middle of the road tone that should work for just about any context that way if you need a baseline. They're not too casual, they're not too formal. A lot of people go too far in the direction of formality where it feels very stiff, almost like 1950s formal. And I think that, most people can err on the side of being slightly more casual. I will also say, there are people who have sent really, really goofy emails to Fortune executives and gotten really great responses out of it. So again, this falls under, there's no one way to do it, but probably the safest way to start is to take a tone like what you see I've used. And then you can test other things in smaller doses and see how
Okay,
they
and
work for you.
what about when you get a no? Do you have any sequence that we should use, or we should leave it like, okay, we can email them in 4 3 weeks or 3 4 weeks, or we should leave it there? We should continue sending emails to this like no email campaign. Do you have any recommendation for this? Like for
Yeah.
people who's negative
So sort of
responses?
depends how they said no, but if they were just like not interested, the likelihood of them replying to you varies greatly, right? But it doesn't really hurt to reach back out and say, hey, thanks so much for taking the time to respond to me. If you're willing to give me 2 more seconds, could you let me know why you don't think this is a fit? Because it'll help me better serve other people. So you can say something like that. That's very soft, also very complimentary of them. You're thanking them for even responding. And any information that you get back from them on that, either one shows you, oh, they misunderstood what you said, and then you can address that with them, or it shows you an objection that other prospects might have and how you might want to address that. So yeah, I would absolutely reply to those as long as, they were generally at least neutral in that response, as long as they're not like, take me off your list or I'm going to burn down your office, right? Like, every now and then you'll get one of those, but
Yes,
don't engage
me too.
them.
Okay. Well, there's someone here saying that he sends GIFs and memes to CEOs, C-levels, and
Yeah.
he gets responses. So I think it's working for him. It could work for you. But would you recommend adding, okay, GIFs, memes, but what about like a PDF or a picture? about like your product or any other stuff? Like would you add attachments to the cold email?
I wouldn't send it as an attachment, but like embed it in like a GIF or a meme or something like that. You absolutely can. I don't personally do a whole lot of that because it's not so much my personality type, but I know a lot of really, really successful people in the space who do it. So if that fits your personality type as well, then absolutely test it and see if it fits your market too. Because yeah,
Okay.
they're absolutely right.
And what about rates? What's a good acceptance rate, a good response rate for cold email,
By
according to your
acceptance rate, do
experience?
you mean open rate or is
Like
that
open
meeting rate?
rate, sorry, open
Okay,
rate and
that's
meeting
okay.
rate also.
To be
Yes.
sure. So for open rates, I like to see between 40 at the low end to 60% on my open rates. If I can get higher than that, of course, I'm happy. But that's where I want it to be as a starting point. My meeting rate on that, I'm looking for as a baseline KPI, between 1% to 2% of the people who I sent the email to should become meetings. That sounds really low, and you can certainly take it higher depending on how you curate the list and other things like that. But remember, this is cold outreach. So these people haven't heard from me before and may not be in a buying cycle. So that's the baseline KPI, just like it is for purchases on cold traffic.
Okay. I had another question, but I forgot. But if you want to continue with the presentation, because I think there's no other question. Nope, that's it.
Okay. Well, now we can go through some of your guys' emails. So everybody who sent these in only had a single email in their sequence. And so that's my first recommendation for everybody is build out a sequence based on, kind of the frameworks I gave you here. And if you want to add GIFs and things like that to them, make them funny, by all means, go ahead. You have the core bones to work with.
I remember my question just before starting. How much
Yeah.
time would you wait after testing to see the results, to see if it's working for you or not working for you?
So when I worked in agencies, we always said at least 1,000 emails out. But when you're a small business, you're unlikely to hit those numbers. So you kind of have to work off gut sooner than that. I look at what the first 100 emails have done. Do I have any replies yet? Do I have any meetings yet? Are my open rates generally good? And then I watch it as we continue to send because, those stats could go up or down from there. But, by the first 100, you should have at least some gut feel of what's happening. That's
Okay.
my feeling anyway.
And what about like days? When should we send them or like
So
any recommendation on this or like
I don't have recommendations on that. Actually,
okay.
you guys, having like the analytics that you have might have better recs on that. So much of my background was in agencies or in sales where we had things we had to do every day, emails that had to go out every day. And so, you couldn't just say we're only going to send on Tuesday at 9 a.m. or we're only going to send in this 6 a.m. block. And so I haven't spent as much time like digging into what days are better because the contexts that I've worked in haven't really allowed for that.
Okay, it's good. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other like questions on anything we've covered so far before we dig into your
No,
guys'
I think
emails?
that's it.
All right. Okay. So the nice people over at Dragon Professional, I'm not sure who submitted this, but they were nice enough to give us one of their emails to do a review on. And I had to translate it out of the French. So I apologize in advance if it's
If
a
it
little bit
sounds
more.
weird.
Yeah, if it sounds weird. This was run through Google Translate because unfortunately I don't speak French. So just full disclosure for anybody reading this, if it sounds weird, that's probably a good part of it. But the first thing that I'll give you here is, the subject line is longer than what I would like to see. I'd like to see them test some other ones on this. They're not sending this yet, so we didn't have stats to work on. And on the next screen, I'll show you how I kind of gave them a new framework for this. But they start without, as hello, sir, madam. I know there was a more generic greeting in there, but it didn't translate very well. I would try as hard as you can to find the first name of the person that you guys are emailing. I know that can be hard. They reach out to small or to legal offices. So sometimes it can be hard if you're looking for an office manager, things like that, to actually get the names. But if you can, or the name of one of the attorneys, I would try very hard to do that. And then if you want to be more formal, it's going to be hard to split that list, but you could, use a salutation with their last name if you don't feel comfortable addressing them by their first name. So I take the liberty of contacting you to present Dragon Professional Anywhere solution, a voice recognition adapted to the requirements of legal professionals. And then they give a link to learn more. I would encourage you guys to think about the problems that those legal professionals are having that would cause them to look for a solution like Dragon. From what I've read, Dragon basically helps them dictate documents and do their drafts much, much faster. Because it's a speech recognition software with really, really great AI. And I would be highlighting, I think, some of those things and the things that make it specifically a great fit for legal offices much sooner. And then the main call to action is for them to sign up for a trial, although they do say I'm at your disposal if you need any further information. Let me show you how I would reframe this for you guys. I didn't have the information to fully rewrite it, but I think this will give you a really good start. So I would try a subject line. This is a very general one, like question for your team. This may not be the one that works best for you, but I wanted to give you something to start with to test. So hi, first name. That might also be Ms. last name, Mr. last name, depending on how you feel comfortable addressing these people. Wondering if anyone in your office has considered using voice transcription for drafting documents. So you're engaging them with a question right off the bat. I think I would start there. And then we have a number of law firms using Dragon Professional to draft and give some document examples for how they're using it. So these people can help or can start seeing themselves and their team, how this would help them. Because unlike most voice transcription, and then talk about the benefits specifically to lawyers. So why it's different than other voice transcription, if you think that's the right tack. If none of these people have ever considered voice transcription before, then you're gonna have to talk about why they might want to do this over manually writing out documents like they're doing now. But then we go to the benefits, like the accuracy is up to 99% out of the box. And many of the practices using it found that they're able to cut down on repetitive administrative work that takes them away from their actual clients. If you think there could be any benefit to your team, would you be open to some more information specific to how other attorneys are using it? So I wanted to build in that idea of what's the benefit to them of engaging with this email at all. You might leave a PS on here that says, PS, if you prefer to just check it out yourself, here's a link to a 14-day trial. You are more than welcome to take the tour and let me know if you have any questions. So that's how I would handle that. But take this framework and try to get the specifics in here, because I think you'll do a lot better with it when you launch.
I like it better. It sounds casual, but it goes straight to the point. So yes.
Awesome. All right. So the next one, oops, where did they go? There we go. Brian from Neuron Up also sent an email that's working pretty darn well for them. Where did it? Here we go. Sorry. So he's starting with a merge field already. That is, oh, sorry. Somehow I mixed up my slides on. Bear with me, guys. I mixed up the slides. Or did I?
It's fine.
No, I didn't. Okay. Sorry. I mixed up my headings. All right. So I put these in here this morning after we'd collected them all. So hi, first name. I have seen that you work in the field of rehabilitation therapy, and I thought you might be interested to see how we at Neuron Up have helped clinics and rehab centers like Mount Sinai, Brooks Rehabilitation to create personalized and engaging cognitive stimulation interventions with our platform for professionals. Would you have 10 minutes to let me tell you how it works? Kind regards. So Brian's results are pretty good. They've sent 956 so far. They had an 18% acceptance rate, which, Sophia, that's the same as an open rate, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then they've booked 10 meetings out of it, which is a 1% meeting booked rate, which is a solid starting KPI. Do we want to see him book more meetings out of that? Absolutely. But that tells us that this is generally working to start with. And so the couple points that I would give on this, which I did do a little rewrite on it, would be, depending on who you're reaching out to, do the big rehab centers like Mount Sinai and Brooks, do they make the little guys feel like it might not be for them? So that's something that I might consider if you also work with small rehab centers. And then engaging cognitive stimulation interventions. It may be that that is the exact appropriate wording for that. But if there is a simpler way to say it, I would consider that. Let me come over here and show you the kind of recommendation that I gave you. And so, Brian, if you're listening in on this, you might use this as a second email in your sequence. You might pivot it in, test it against what you have and see if it improves things. I think your biggest lifts will come from looking at your subject line so that you can bring your open rate up, since it's only 18% right now. That could come from subject lines. It could also come from your data. I don't have a way of knowing that for you based on the information we have. But if you're seeing a lot of bounce backs and things like that, then also be looking at the data. Consider your targeting. So I saw on the thing you mentioned that you're reaching out to OT directors as well as OTs and OTAs themselves. See who the meetings are coming from so far, whether or not one of those is more likely to be to answer the meeting or take the meeting than another. And that may depend on the size of the rehab center. But I would just look at that and see if there's any way you can improve that or get more targeted on that. That could also impact your open rates. And then add a sequence to increase your meetings. Because it seems like once somebody actually opens the email, you're doing really well with what you have. So what I gave you here is reaching out because I think you might be interested in what Neuron Up is doing to help other OTS, and then insert a patient outcome of using Neuron Up. We're currently working with both small private OT practices as well as large rehab centers like Mount Sinai and Brooks Rehabilitation to create personalized and engaging cognitive stimulation interventions with our platform for professionals. If you're, and then qualify them somehow here, whether it's if they don't have something like that now, if they're looking for a better way to do this now, if they've ever wished such and such a thing, like you'll know what those appropriate qualifications are going to be for them. Would you be open to exploring if we could benefit your patients as well? Many thanks, Brian. So this is how I would reframe that. But like I said, I think your biggest problem with the email you have now is that your open rates are low because you already have 10 meetings off of only, less than 20% open rate. So you've got the right stuff in there. So yeah, great job. All right. Email review, Alejandra at Inversiones Fasulac. And sorry if I said that horribly wrong. But let me tell you, Alejandra, you have a great email here. It's different in a lot of ways than like my framework, although a lot of the things are in here. Your opener is a little bit different. It's very personal. You're talking about, that this is a family business. You've been in the market for 45 years. So already there's a lot of credibility there, but it also has that like small personal feel. Alejandra has not scaled this email yet. It's been sent to 10 people. Half of them have opened it so far, and she's already booked 2 meetings off of it. That's an incredible book meeting rate. So I didn't rewrite this for you because you're already killing it with this. If you start to scale it and it doesn't keep tracking and performing like this for you, then message me and I will look at it for you and make some other tweaks for you. But I think your best thing that you can do as you scale it is make sure that there's a sequence that comes behind it, because I'm sure the people you're reaching out to are busy. And, the more and more you send it, the more people who are likely to miss an email because you're reaching out to a larger pool of people. But it seems like you already have this very well targeted and like you already know this market very, very well to be generating those results. So use the sequence that I gave you. So anybody who doesn't open or book a meeting with you, they get a few follow-ups so you can touch base with them. But let me run you guys through what is in Alejandra's email so you can see why it's doing what it's doing. One, like I said, I would bet that she has this targeted extremely well. She knows who she's reaching out to. She also has a product or a service that they really want, or access to products that they really want. So she has a nice personal opener here that she represents their company, where they're from, their family business. They've been in the market for 45 years. And then what they do, they're a producer, marketer, and distributor of dairy products. Currently, so a little bit more credibility. They're in the main chains in Bogota and in TAT and in platforms such as Mercado. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. The one thing I would question is like platforms. Does that mean stores in this case, or I wasn't sure the context of the business. There may be a better word for platforms, although it doesn't seem to be affecting your email in any way, shape, or form.
I think this email was written in Spanish. That's why platform. I think it's related to the store or somewhere where they are selling their products. But yeah.
Yeah. I didn't have to translate it. It came through in English. So that's why I wasn't sure if, but yeah, so I would just look at that word choice and just make sure it's appropriate or, the best choice. But we would love to be a part of your platform as well. For this reason, I'm contacting you with the possibility of organizing a meeting and review of our portfolio. That reads very formal. And I would personally probably write it slightly differently, but because this email is performing, I'm not going to touch it because there's no reason to make an adjustment to something that's working this well right now. I am completely sure that we have competitive and excellent quality products that will have an excellent result within your business. The only thing she could maybe do here is mention some of their key sellers, but what Alejandra has done is attached a presentation for their company. So I would bet that if she'd given me her click rates, we must see the people who have booked meetings, we must see a great click rate going through to look at that attachment. And they're probably going, yes, this is stuff that we want. So as you scale, you may not be able to do an attachment on these emails. So you may want to mention some of those quality products right here and a few other bullet points like we've done in some of the other sequencing. But great job on this because it's working really well for you. And other than some very preferential stuff, there's not much to change on this. So and I think
there's
that
someone
was the...
who just sent their copy. I don't know if you want to take a look at it or they should contact you and send it to you. It's just in the conversation in the chat. If you go to the chat,
yeah, is that Paul's?
Yes.
Okay. So Paul, quick question for you if you're still listening in. What are your stats on this so far? Like, have you been sending it? Do you have open rates or meeting take rates on this yet?
I don't know.
All right, while we're waiting, 30% open rate. All right, so your open rate isn't bad. You might want to, I would test other subject lines as well to see if you can, if you can bring that up to more between 40 to 60%. So I would do something a little bit shorter. Yep, it's long. Yeah, it is. And it also immediately tips your hand that it's a sales email, which, I don't like to trick people, but also when people are scanning through their inbox, they're more likely to push something off that they can absolutely identify within the first, glance that it's somebody trying to sell them something, unless they happen to be ready to buy that thing right that moment. So, you might test against that with something a little bit more generic, like quick question or QA at, their company. And so your opening, I use ones like this a lot too. I think it's pretty good. I might, instead of saying I'm looking to talk with somebody, I might say, hey, Paul, reaching out because I think you're the person to talk to about web quality assurance training at your company. And then you might say like that your company empower. I think I would go into the problem that they might have with training first before I get to exactly like the stuff about empowering staff. Like what's the gap that your training addresses? I think I would get that in there first. So what is most of this training missing that you guys do better? I think I would reframe it just slightly like that. And then do you have any interest in a 5-10 minute chat next week? Your link. These can work really well. If it's not working as well for you as you would like, soften up that CTA and ask if they'd mind or if they'd be open to some more information or if they would be open to discussing further. Sometimes I have people book directly through those links and I'm always super happy when that happens. And other times, I find that they want to engage in a little bit of like email back and forth first, but that's how I would rework that. Cool. All right, good. I'm glad you like that. Thanks for sending that over, Paul. And then Michael asked what I would consider a good cold email open rate, between 40 to 60%. Yeah.
So I think that's it. We don't have any more questions.
Yep. And Paul did mention attachments in, your cold email will get you spammed more often. And he's right. I wouldn't normally recommend attachments in a cold email. So yeah, great best
So
practice to.
if you want to send an attachment, you add a link and that's it.
Yeah, I would use it as a link.
Okay.
I would try to avoid doing that in a first email. Like the only reason I'm not really picking on that in Alejandra's email is because her open rates are good and it's clearly working very well up front. But yeah, if you could convert it to a link, that'd probably scale a little bit better for you. For sure. So yeah. Any other questions that you guys have or anything like that?
Let me see the Q&A. There's something else, but I think I already read them to you. Yep. I think that's it. Do you want to add something else? Wait, there's one. Aren't people worried about hyperlinks being spam? Would you recommend any tool to add the links like Bit.ly or any other? I don't know any other tool about this, but
one of the best ways to do links, I still use them. Like I'll use them mostly in a signature block versus in the body of the email so much. But the best way to do it is to make sure they match the send domain. So typically 1-2 links max. And again, I typically use them in my signature block instead of in the body of my email. And so that's going to be like a website link or a link to some very specific information they might be interested in. But then I want to make sure that they match my send domain. That's not always easy to do, but and that usually requires getting the techies involved on that, which takes it out of my scope. But that's the best way to send a link and ensure that you still have like good deliverability on it.
Okay.
And then Brian also asked, or Bryant, sorry, what about case studies link, like a Google Drive link? I probably wouldn't. I would put them on your website so that you can make your link match your send domain, and I would put it in the signature block. The other way you can do that is if you have some testimonials or things like that, you could even include them in your signature, just the text themselves. And Ashley makes a good note. If you're on LinkedIn, keep your link to a doc or your videos on LinkedIn itself. So make sure that they're loaded to your LinkedIn profile so you can link from there. That's a great point. John asks, how often should one resend emails if no response is received? So I would use, that 6, sorry, give me 1 second. All right, I think I can talk now. I would use that 6 email sequence that I gave you, that 6 touch sequence, and, send that out over like 8-9 weeks, somewhere in there. And if nobody, if you don't get responses, the people who haven't responded but haven't unsubscribed, I would wait until like next quarter. So, give it up to like 6 months. Just make sure that you recheck those emails. So you want to revalidate them and make sure that they're still valid emails because people change jobs and things like that.
Okay, and between each email, you would wait 1 day, 3 days, 4 days, a week?
I vary it a little bit, but to be safe, like if I'm telling somebody else to just take this and do it where I'm not there to guide them on it or sequence it specifically, give it at least a week between emails.
Okay.
That way you're safe, and if you see that your reply rates are really, really low, or your open rates are really, really low, you have a chance to go in and correct things before you've sent too many. And it keeps your send volume a little bit lower. So if you're not, if you're not a crazy cold email expert and like a deliverability expert, I would leave things spaced out more because it gives you more margin for error. That's how I would approach it anyway.
Okay.
And Ashley asked if the deck will be available.
Would you let me share the
absolutely.
deck for them?
Yeah, because I actually have a couple of resources linked for them at the end. So they're here.
Good. So I'll share the replay link, our next episode, and the deck, Elyse deck, so you can have it all, okay? You will receive it next. I think you will receive it tomorrow with a Zoom email where you will have all the links that will get you to Elyse's presentation and Elyse's profile too, in case you want to contact her back, okay?
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for having me. This was great. And yeah, have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you very much, Elyse, and thank you all for joining us today. We'll have our next episode I think it's December 14th, and this will be a cold email masterclass with Andrew from Lead Hype. So this will join all the things we have seen here and in the last episode with Jeremy Chatelan. Okay. Thank you very much, all, and see you in the next episode. Bye, Elise. Bye, bye,
Bye.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you.